It is the time of the year where milkweed seed pods are starting to dry out and can be harvested. And we're going to talk a little bit about how to save those milkweed seeds. So just a little disclaimer here before we get into the information. You can buy milkweed seed from a lot of different sources. For those of you that are unfamiliar with milkweed, it is the host plant for the monarch butterfly. It is a very popular pollinator plant. It is a native plant to Missouri, and you can buy milkweed seed in a number of different places. So that's certainly an option. But if you harvest milkweed seed from local sites, you know that you're getting plants that are going to do good in this area. They're well adapted to our climate and soil conditions, and you may have better luck with just collecting seeds locally. Now, if you are wanting to collect seeds and they're not on your property, make sure that you have permission from the landowner and let them know what you're doing. And when you do collect the seeds, don't remove the entire plant, just collect the seed pods. And we're going to look at what some of these seed pods look like. Okay, so I want to talk about a few types of milkweed that are pretty readily found throughout Missouri. The first is called common milkweed, and common milkweed is a pretty tall plant, has very large leaves, and it can grow in a variety of habitat. The next is marsh or swamp milkweed. It is more of a wetland species. The flower clusters are differently shaped, but pretty common and can really grow about anywhere. The orange milkweed is fairly common on roadsides and dry areas. It's called butterfly milkweed, and you can see a picture of it here. I'm sure you've all seen that before driving down the road. The one here on the bottom is called whorled milkweed, and the plant and leaf structure looks much different from other types of milkweed, but nonetheless, it is a type of milkweed. It can be a little bit aggressive, and it'll grow well in a variety of habitats. The next is purple milkweed here at the top. This is a clump-forming plant and is often found in open woodlands or the edges of woodlands. And then on the bottom, we have one of my favorites just because of the beautiful and unique flower color, and this is green or spider milkweed. And this type of milkweed prefers more dry areas. So those are just some of the common ones that you might see here in Missouri. There's other ones as well, but you did see some pictures of what their seed pods looked like. They have the same basic shape, but there are some size differences amongst the different types. Now, when it comes to harvesting seeds, one thing that you want to do is you want to wait until they are dried out, that the seeds are actually brown. And you can see here in this no yes picture, if the seed pod is still green on the outside, that's a pretty good indication that those seeds aren't quite ready for harvest yet. So don't harvest those. The seeds won't continue to mature after they're separated from the mother plant. So just leave them on the plant until they get a little bit further along. Once that seed pod starts to dry and even crack open, that's when you know it's time to harvest the seeds. Now, if you've grown milkweed before, you know that when these seed pods pop open, they have the little fluffy material attached to the seeds, which catches in the wind, and those seeds can blow all over the place. And then before you know it, you are fighting milkweed plants almost like a weed. So if you don't want those seed pods to crack open and self-seed themselves, you can put a loose rubber band around the seed pod or a twist tie, and then you can still monitor it for drying, and you can tell when it's ready to harvest. So one thing I've noticed on my milkweed seed pods is a lot of milkweed bugs, and you can see a picture of those here. They're red and black insects, and they eat milkweed seed. They don't do harm to the plant, but if you do have a pod that's covered in these, it's likely that the seed is no longer viable So don't harvest anything that looks like this. So what about the white fluffy material that is attached to the seeds? Do you need to separate that? How do you separate that? Well, I have been collecting milkweed seed for years. I don't typically take the fluff off just because I don't have time, but I do make sure that I store my seed correctly. And then there's a lot of air circulation in there, but it's certainly easier to store if you remove all of that fluff. One thing that you can do is put the seeds in a paper bag with a few coins, shake it up. The coins help to remove the seeds from the fluff, and then you can cut a small hole in the bottom corner of the bag and shake out the seeds. So that's one way that you can remove them. The picture here on the left shows a seed pod that has just cracked open. And if you can catch it before all of that fluff starts to expand, you can gently use your fingers and kind of wipe off the seeds. Now, boy, you would have to really be monitoring those seed pods to catch it at this stage, but that is a possibility. The picture here on the right, I believe, was from the Xerces Society, and they had used a shop vac with a filter over it to separate the seed from the fluff. But they didn't recommend doing this because it took a lot of time, but it's certainly something that can be done. So once you have the seed separated from the fluff and you're ready to store your seed, make sure that it's good and dry. Moisture is an issue when saving seed. You want to make sure it's completely dry before you start the storage process. So once you have your seed stored and you start to think about planting, keep in mind that milkweed seed is a native plant. So it's going to need a period of cool weather followed by a period of warm weather to stratify that seed, to make it be ready to germinate. Milkweed seed has a pretty hard outer seed coat, so it needs that period of cool weather followed by warm weather to start to break down that seed coat and to start the chemical reaction in the seed to make it germinate. So do keep that in mind. And with keeping that in mind, you don't want to store it long-term in the refrigerator, but you can stratify the seed in the refrigerator. And I've used this method many, many times. So I usually start this in late spring or early summer. I will wrap milkweed seeds in a wet paper towel, not dripping wet, just slightly wet. Put it in a Ziploc bag, put it in my refrigerator for a couple of weeks. And that kind of mimics winter weather and wakes that seed up and starts the germination process. So that is one thing that you can do. Another thing that you can do is sow your milkweed seed in the fall. If you have an area that's kind of naturalized, if you have a big wildflower area, you can go out there and just spread that seed around the area and let it overwinter. And again, that freezing, thawing, cold and warm process breaks down the seeds and starts the germination process as well. Another thing that you can do is if we are scheduled to get a snow events are a great way to sow wildflower seeds. You can go out, spread your seeds on the ground. It's going to snow on top of the seeds. And then once that snow starts to melt, it helps to kind of move that seed down to the soil level and start the growing process. Another way that you can sow your milkweed seeds is something that we call winter sowing. It's basically just starting seeds in milk jugs or any other kinds of jugs and leaving them outside throughout the winter. It kind of acts like a mini greenhouse, and this works really well with milkweed seeds and other types of native wildflower seeds. I've got a few resources here, but there's a lot of information online about saving milkweed seeds and storing and all of that. But here's a couple of great resources if you want to check that out further.